Hello again, it's Mr. Pete, your YouTube shop teacher, and this is tips number 630, part 2 of making a tiny arbor press, which is exactly like, well, it's a Nutcracker is what it is, but I'm going to call it an arbor press. And in the previous video, which was 629, I went this far and I'm all ready to mill the slot. Remember, that's my rough working drawing, my CAD drawing. Let's go over to the Bridgeport mill and make some chips. Be sure and watch these 4 videos concerning rack and pinions. This is a series. The work is set up in the Bridgeport vise. That is a 7/16 end mill. I would not consider using a 1/2 inch end mill, even though it's a 1/2 inch rack, because the slot wouldn't really be a 1/2 inch, more than likely, and it would be ragged. So later on, after I get down to the full depth, then I will go in. I don't really need to change mills, but as I did on the other video, I'll take off an equal amount off of both sides until it is 1/2 inch. But for now, what I want to do is mill back and forth. I've already found the center just by eyeballing. That's good enough because I have a layout there. But I want to mill until I break into the bore. And when I do break into the bore, I will see chips in there. That'll be my clue. Doesn't matter really how much I break into it. And then I'll take it from there. And I will hurry through this. All right, let's make some chips. Okay, did you see the chips fall down into the bore? I've broken through. I know I have shown this in the other video, but I'm going to repeat it. And there are just a lot of different ways to do this, but I think this is the easiest way for somebody to understand. Remember, the working depth is 100, but I'm going to make it 90. So I got the shaft in the bore, and I'm going to bring the cutter down, hope that shows up, until it touches the work. Touch off, if you will. Lock the quill, back this out of the way a little bit, remove, and then I'm going to raise the knee, raise the work, the 90 thousandths. I think I'll do that all in one pass. Okay, that's the working depth. Now I'm ready to take it to the width. I made this thin, remember that's been sawed off, section of a rack, just to, that way I can double check it. Remember, the slot isn't 1/2 inch wide yet. So that's working fine. There's no excess play and there's no binding. So now I'm going to mill the slot to a 1/2 inch wide. Remember, it's 7/16 wide. I will take one side down and measure it to 1/4 inch. So when I'm at 1/4, I'll be done with one side. I'll climb mill on the pass cut for a good finish, and then I'll go over to the other side and make it fit. Four more thousandths.
Now, there might be one over there. Look in the candy bin.
Okay, 5 thousandths to go. All right, the rack fits quite well. Now, you want, well, there's really hardly any wiggle there, but you want enough clearance to where you're not fighting it and you're not aggravating it. Not being aggravated. And then putting the pinion in there. No wonder they're up against the cutter. One more thing to do before I take it out, and that is to bring this to the right height. Remember, there's a little bit of a ridge there right now. This is higher. The red part is higher than it should be. I wanted it to be that way. If you try to do this all in one, well, you could, but it's just more difficult, more prone to error. So I have a few thousandths to take off here. How much? How to determine that? All different kinds of ways. Depth micrometer, blah, blah, blah. But let me use the touch-off method. I don't think I've used this before. I want there to be about, what, 2 or 3 thousandths difference between the height of the aluminum and the height of the steel rack. Okay, how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to use a feeler gauge. I think I used that on the other one. You know, there's other ways of doing that. You could use micrometers. I wouldn't think of using my Starrett. This is a Calvan. I think it's perfectly good. It's just that it's probably more of an automotive tool. So that's the 3 thousandth feeler gauge. It's half-inch wide, so it fits right in there. Bring the quill down until it touches. Lock the quill. And then I've got to drag it out there without damaging that. And that way I'm 3 thousandths above the rack. I got to remove the steel pieces and then I'm ready to mill. Am I showing you too much? I think I'll check it with the depth mic. This is a shear Tomiko. They are very good tools. I don't think they got much credit. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So I've got the rack in place, and I absolutely do not want the cover plate to bind it. Well, I don't have screws for it, but I'm going to put a little pressure on it, and it moves fine. Very little play sideways. Little bit of play. Well, 3 thousandths. You got to have some play. Don't force yourself into some tolerance that isn't necessary. This is a Nutcracker. I'm getting near the end. Now, I told you earlier that I intended to rob both the pinion and the rack from the do-nothing machine. I'm also going to take the cover plate off and reuse it, since this is really scrap aluminum. When I showed you how to lay out and drill and tap these holes on this do-nothing machine so that they were accurate, I showed you a method that I do not usually use, and you got to go back and look at that if you haven't seen it. But I'll use the transfer. I'm going to reuse this, recycle it on this one, and I'm simply going to use transfer punches by the old tried and true method. And you know, by that method, what I like to do, there can be a little bit of error introduced by this method. If you punch all 4 of them in a row, this tends to move around. So I'm going to punch one of them, drill it, and tap it, and put a screw in to hold it securely, and then punch the other 3. I will not show all that because that's seen in countless other videos, and I'm sure you know how to do it. But you can screw something up pretty quickly near in the last lap if you're not careful. So take your time and do it right. These are 632 screws, by the way, pretty well proportional to the project. Everything's tightened down. Now, this washer and screw that's just what they call a fender washer, 1/4 inch. You saw that in the other video, and this was already drilled and tapped 1/4 20, so that job's done. Now let me show you what I'm going to do next. And that is, remember I used this collar, I guess you'd call it. And I probably still should, although I'm thinking about using a snap ring, a retaining ring here, just for variety. But of course it will ride on the teeth. Now this could be shortened up a little bit, but gear teeth taper off, you see. So even if I face off perhaps 1/4 inch, I can't go in any farther than that. It starts to bind. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and cut a retaining ring groove right through those teeth, even though it's a interrupted cut. And this is 1 inch diameter. So let me dig up a retaining ring real quickly. See if I have a tool to make that cut, because it really isn't worth grinding a tool for. I have several selections of these. Look, this says Fastenal. Auction, of course. And there are some 1 inchers. Now, boy, that's a big one. Wonder what that came off of. Alright, what's the thickness here? 44.5 thousandths. This is the tool that I just dug up. 41.5. You know what? That's going to work though, because I'm going to plunge cut just a little bit, and then I'm going to move over and plunge cut it so that it will go on, I think. So let me get that marked, and I'm just going to do that over on the closing lathe, but I want this to be flush. Oh, not that flush. Flush, and I'll mark it here. You know what? This little tool I ground a long time. Well, I was still in my prime. Did you hear that? My wife just yelled down the stairs, "You never had a prime." Thanks a lot. Well, I'm going to have to take a break on this because some things are more important than others. Hello, Henry, what do you want to do?
I want to build a diorama.
Okay. Well, you know what? As much as I love this machine shop, I realize now that I can't say, "Oh, we'll do it tomorrow. Oh, we'll do it next week." I did that too much with my own kids. Let's go on up, Henry, and build something. I'm back, and it's an hour later, and I had a good time playing with Henry. We made a diorama with his little animals. He loves to do that. Okay, I just cut a sample groove for the ring and the other end, the waist end. This will be cut off. And I looked it up in the machinery's handbook, and it requires for a 1 inch ring, usually I wing it, but I thought I'd tell you the right way to do it. Okay, 94 thousandths deep, and what did I say, 45 thousandths wide. 95 thousandths deep. And on it goes. And I have just a little bit sticking out here for the washer. That's going to be great. Now I need to decide where I'm going to cut this off. because there's going to be a handle going through there. Let's say the handle is going to be, this is baguette and bagosh. So I'll cut it off right here and drill a hole. And you know what? I'm going to do that tomorrow. I'm getting hungry. See you then. Well, it's the next day. Welcome back, and I'm in a good mood today. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the cross hole. That's a 5/16 cross hole in the pinion with a 5/16 drill bit. And of course I'm using the world famous Heinrich cross hole drill jig. You've seen me make all kinds of handles over the years by different methods, and generally, and that's what I'm using today, is just a threaded rod with hex nuts put onto it and then rounded off. And you can see that the kids used the grinder. They just ground it off in a grinder because these particular kids didn't have access to a lathe. This very old one from 1922, I've never seen one done like that. It probably was a very cheap way of doing it, but the end was turned down and a washer put on there and staked. You also saw me, you'll be seeing more of this, you also saw me using ball bearings that I softened and pressed on and held with Loctite. So anyway, I've already taken a piece of 5/16 rod and threaded both ends, and for a change, I've never done this, but I'm going to use lock washers and round them off. And I just changed my mind. I'm not going to round them at all. That's good enough. For who's it for? You know, I never thought about that. But then again, these nuts, I think if you go to Ace Hardware, are like 35 cents each. I will now turn my attention to the bottom here and drill and tap that hole. I've already got a center line, and I'm going to kind of determine where that will be drilled. I don't know if it should be halfway through, but it also depends on the size of the swivel that I use. I might make the swivel first. This is the kind of swivel that I most often used at school. This is just a piece of 1-inch aluminum that's been counterbored and then a hole drilled and tapped into the end. Now, in a beginning metals class, to drill and tap a hole into the end of the screw without a lathe was virtually impossible. So I would usually have the advanced class make up a bunch of those, and usually the advanced class make up a bunch of the swivels. But you can see that whoever put this swivel on, let's see who it was. Well, I don't see the name on there. Anyway, the swivel doesn't swivel. He's got it down too tight. So we wanted the swivel to swivel. Well, there's a lot of different ways of making that, and again on the 1922 model here, look how that was done. That's a stamping, cup-shaped, put onto the threaded rod that's been turned down, and then it's been staked. Very cheap and effective way of doing it, and that would dig into the wooden table. That would be pretty good. Someone gave this, actually gave two of them to me a year or two ago. I came home and I found them on my back porch, my back stoop, and I thought, what? Well, later somebody told me that they put them on there. They said, I don't know what it is. Well, and I didn't either until I recognized that name. I think it stands for Central Scientific Company. That's a piece of chemistry apparatus that would be clamped onto the bench, or the laboratory bench, and different kinds of rods and apparatus, probably physics. I said chemistry, but in physics they used all kinds of Frankenstein stuff also. Of course, some strong-armed kid bent that, and these do not move in and out. But here's a nice job. This would have been expensive, cast iron. I like the way those knobs are made. And look at this screw here. Very nicely made. Necked down here because that's a rolled thread. And then, anyway, off topic, this is the way I'm going to do it right now. That's a piece of 1-inch stock. It's been dished out a bit. Steel, this is steel. It's been chamfered very nicely there to give it good appearance. And then I've never seen this done before, but there's a cross hole drilled with a roll pin to keep it from moving, of course. And it's been staked. Off camera now, I did several things. Number one, I took a bolt and threaded it a little bit further, just with a hand die that looked something like this. Matter of fact, exactly like this. And I forgot how much I paid for that. But anyway, and I also made a swivel. Don't look too closely, I'm not proud of it. But anyway, this turn down and countersunk is going to go on there, and I'm going to stake it with trying to allow it to still swivel. But the reason I did that first is now I'm able to locate where I want this to be. Where I want the hole to be, that is. Very similar to that. So I'm going to drill and tap that hole on this, but off camera. Well, there it is. I really should clean up this old bolt, and that's a lot longer than what I needed, really. I got a million bolts, but I'm not going back to do it again. And I do not intend to make a handle for that. This will have to be mounted to the bench with a wrench, but in fact it will never get used anyway, so it doesn't matter. I think I'll clean it up, remove the bluing, and go ahead and stake that. Now, did I say that? But it is center drilled on the end to facilitate that. And sometimes I used to countersink these. I should say counter bore. I'm going to countersink it just a little bit off camera. I'll be back in a few minutes after this is all cleaned up. Alright, here's how I did this. This is a little bit of a center that I made years ago. Just happened to find, I had a heck of a time finding it. I put it in a vise and I tightened this up, hammered it rather violently, tightened it up some more. I didn't want to strip this thread, and repeated that. And by the way, that's what that looks like. And it did flare the end of this. Rather than staking it, it flared it, so it does spin and it's on reasonably tight. And I did remove the bluing. Let me go ahead and put in the rack and pinion, and this job is done. I bought this Nutcracker last summer at a flea market for $2. And we made one very, very similar to this at school, probably hundreds of them. That really excited the kids. And it was a pattern, split pattern, with cores, 2 cores. So I spent a lot of time on it. They didn't. But anyway, that's a good way to crack nuts, but who's going to do that? So this is my Nutcracker, and it is together, and it looks like that. Now, even this space here is not enough to clamp it to my maple workbench. So let me clamp it to a piece of wood, and let's crack some nuts. This is my dad, a picture from the high school yearbook. I've talked about him before. And I can still see him, but this is back in the 50s, sitting on our ragged couch, smoking a Lucky, which, by the way, killed him, cracking those nuts, and then he had the Nutcracker that went with this set. Do you recognize these? They were picks, and my mother used these for every purpose, including untying our knotted shoelaces so we could get our shoes off. And So I have fond memories of that. He particularly liked what they called Brazil nuts, which I never cared for. Off topic again, but please watch this wonderful video. Not a wonderful video, it's a video about the wonderful Bridgeport scale model. Many thousands of people have watched it. Read through the comments, some of which will bring tears to your eyes. But why am I bringing that up again? Because there is a tiny rack and pinion. I do not think I showed it in that video, but perhaps you can see it here. Where's my flashlight? Rack. Can you see the rack? It's a double rack, actually, that the little pinion here is acting on. So imagine James cutting that, and be sure and watch this video, because this is one of the most amazing models that I've ever seen. It belongs in the Smithsonian. Well, here it is. And I was going to crack some nuts for you, but I couldn't find any nuts around the house. Nobody cracks nuts anymore. We buy them in a package, a cellophane package, pecan halves for $9. But the closest I could come was a bowl of these nuts, and I don't think I'm going to be able to crack these nuts. But anyway, you get the idea of what this thing is all about. But you know what? This would be fairly good as a press for somebody that's doing real small work, where they just needed a small press. But that type of work can usually be done on the drill press, using the drill press quill as a press. I've done that a lot for lathe pressing. But alright, I hope you liked the video. I'll see you next time. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.